The sun drops below the horizon. Within minutes, the temperature begins to fall. There is no light switch, no street lamp, no glowing screen anywhere on Earth. For your ancestors, roughly 300,000 years ago, this moment arrived every single day of their lives. And what happened next shaped almost everything about how humans think, bond, and sleep. So what did ancient humans actually do once the sun went down? The answer is far more structured and far more important to human survival than most people assume. Start with the most basic fact. Darkness was not optional, and it was not brief. Depending on latitude and season, your ancestors faced 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours of true darkness every night. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner spent years studying the Juhuansi people of the Kalahari and documented something striking. Daytime and nighttime conversation among hunter-gatherers were almost entirely different in content. During daylight hours, talk was practical. Complaints, economic matters, criticism, coordination of tasks. But once night fell and people gathered around the fire, conversation shifted dramatically toward storytelling, social bonding, and discussion of relationships across the wider group. The fire was the hinge on which the entire night turned. Before flame, your ancestors faced darkness exposed to every predator with better night vision than their own. Archaeologist Dennis Sandgath, who has extensively studied fire use among early humans and Neanderthals, found evidence that fire was not just present at ancient campsites, but maintained deliberately and repeatedly in the same locations over long periods. This single technology did more than provide warmth. It pushed back the edge of danger, created a pool of visibility in an otherwise pitch-black world, and gave your ancestors a reason to gather in one place rather than disperse. Around that fire, something distinctly human took shape. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner's research describes nighttime firelight conversation as serving a function almost impossible to replicate during the day. It allowed people to discuss others who were not present, to tell stories about distant relatives, to share myths that explained where the group came from and what dangers existed beyond their direct experience. This is sometimes called extended social cognition, the ability to think and talk about people, places, and events beyond what is immediately visible. Around a daytime fire, with tasks pressing and faces clearly readable, this kind of expansive storytelling rarely happened. At night, with faces softened by flame and the practical business of the day finished, it flourished. Now picture a specific evening. The hunters have returned. Food has been shared according to the group's customs. Children who spent the day trailing adults and playing at the camp's edge are gathered closer to the fire as the light fails. An elder begins a story, perhaps about an ancestor, perhaps about a dangerous animal encountered seasons ago, perhaps a piece of moral instruction wrapped in narrative. The children listen. The adults listen too, even though many have heard the story before. The repetition is not boredom. It is how the group's shared knowledge gets reinforced, generation after generation, without writing of any kind. This was not entertainment in the modern sense. It was infrastructure. Once the fire burned low and conversation quieted, sleep itself looked different than it does for you tonight. Historian and sleep researchers studying pre-industrial and small-scale societies without artificial light have found that uninterrupted darkness lasting many hours does not produce one continuous block of unconsciousness. Instead, sleep tends to organize itself into two segments, separated by a period of calm wakefulness in the deep middle of the night. Psychiatrist Thomas Wehr demonstrated this directly in a controlled experiment. When modern participants were placed in 14 hours of nightly darkness with no artificial light, their sleep spontaneously split into two phases within weeks, with 1 to 3 hours of quiet waking between them. There is no reason to think your ancestors' nights worked differently. a long stretch of darkness, a first period of sleep, then a waking interval, then a second period of sleep before dawn. That middle-of-the-night waking window was not wasted time. Embers were checked and fed. A parent might wake briefly to nurse an infant. Someone might lie quietly, half aware, listening to the sounds of the group breathing nearby and the occasional shift of the fire. In small-scale societies studied today, including groups like the Hadza of Tanzania, who still live without electric light, anthropologists have documented exactly this kind of low-key nighttime wakefulness. Not anxious, not treated as a problem, simply a normal second act within a long night. Danger did not disappear after dark, and your ancestors knew it. Night was when many predators hunted most effectively. Camps were arranged with this fact built into their structure. Sleeping areas positioned near the fire's light, with someone, often several people, in a state of light, easily broken sleep rather than universal deep unconsciousness. A fully synchronized, equally deep sleep across the entire group would have been a serious liability. Staggered wakefulness, even unintentional, meant the camp was rarely without at least one set of alert ears. Here is the counterintuitive twist in this story. Modern intuition treats night as simply the absence of day, empty hours to be filled with unconsciousness as efficiently as possible, ideally compressed into one tidy block before the demands of morning resume. The deep history of human nighttime behavior suggests something almost opposite. Night was not an empty interval. It was a distinct, essential phase of daily life, with its own social function, its own rhythm of sleep, and its own contribution to what made early human groups cohesive and intelligent. The storytelling around the fire transmitted culture across generations more effectively than daytime instruction ever could. The segmented sleep pattern may have offered a built-in safety mechanism against the genuine threats of a dark world, and the simple act of gathering close together as light failed, rather than scattering into private isolation, reinforced exactly the kind of group bonds your ancestors needed to survive until morning. You turn off your light tonight, in a room that is rarely truly dark, surrounded by people you may or may not see again until tomorrow, often alone with a glowing screen, rather than a circle of familiar faces. Your ancestors' night looked almost nothing like this. Theirs was communal, firelit, narratively rich, and quietly watchful, a second, vital chapter of the day that modern life has almost entirely erased. Tonight, when the light goes out and the dark settles in, something in you may still expect a fire and the sound of other people breathing nearby.